Today I'm bringing you an amazing Branded Despia deck profile to counter the Fire King meta with options for budget players too. What's potion? You got Matt here and welcome back to another competitive Yu-Gi-Oh video. That's the Nightmare just released and that means that Snake Eye Fire King is now officially the best deck of the format. So, naturally, I'm going to bring you a deck profile for a deck that has absolutely nothing to do with the newest set in Branded Despia. Before you click away, if you want a deck that has a naturally good matchup against Fire King, is able to compete in this Fire King meta, and is significantly less expensive than Fire King is, then you're going to want to stick around. So, if you're excited for the video, then make sure to smash the like button. If this video hits 250 likes, then I'll bring you some amazing live duels using Branded Despia against Fire King to show you how good it really is against the deck. Also, if you like deck profiles, combo guides, meta discussions, and competitive Yu-Gi-Oh videos just like this one, you're going to love this channel. So make sure to subscribe and help us reach our new goal of 7,500 subscribers. But with that being said, here's the best Branded Despia deck profile for the February 2024 post-Phantom Nightmare competitive Yu-Gi-Oh format. Let's jump into it. Alright, so here we are back with the deck profile portion of the video. We are entering into a crazy, potentially tier 0-ish format in Fire King Snake Eyes. Now, personally, I don't think it's going to be tier 0. I think it'll be close to it, but not necessarily that far. And the reason why I don't think it's going to get that far is because there's going to be so many counters to the deck, and there's so many good decks against it, and this is going to be one of them. Branded Despia is a fantastic option against Fire King for multiple reasons, one of the biggest ones being, of course, the lovely Mirror Jade here. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and jump in. I'm going to explain to you the different cards we're playing in this 50-card main deck, 15-card extra, and 15-card side deck. And then I'll also give you different options that you can play for all the more expensive cards in the strategy. Branded Despia is known for being a higher priced deck, not as high price as something like the Fire King Snake Eye deck, but it still is a more expensive deck. And for that reason, I'm going to give you alternatives for the expensive cards too, and reasonings for those as well. But that being said, we have our 50-card main deck to start off with, and of course, we are going to start with the man, the myth, the legend, the mandatory card, the Fallen of Albaz, as I put that way off to the side. There we go. Fallen of Albaz at 3. This card here, playing at 3 copies, is mandatory. I do not agree playing 2 copies anymore. I used to play 2 copies before cash format came around. And then when cash format came around, I put the 3 copies, and I just never looked back because Fallen of Albaz as a interruption is great, but having it in your hand too is so nice because then you can just activate effects like Cartesia on the field to fusion summon, you can use Polymerization to fusion summon, and you can play around Ash Blossom that way. It's also great to just have in your graveyard. Having it there allows you to turn on so much more of your engine, like the Cartesia summon. You can summon it back with the Quem to get interruption, or with the Rindrum, or with so many other cards. So I feel like having Albaz at 3 is mandatory. I also really like 2 copies of Albion the Shrouded Dragon. This card here is great because not only is it Albaz in the graveyard, which can come up quite a bit, so you can use it for fusion summons, but you can also use it as a great option to send cards to the graveyard, like your Branded Retribution, or your Branded Fusion, or your Branded Opening, any of your branded spells and traps, and then bottom deck it. If it's in your hand when you do that, then that's even better because you have to draw a card again. Now keep in mind, that can play into Droll and Lockbird, and we don't want to do that all the time, but it is also a great card to send off the effect of something like a Branded Opening, or to discard off the effect of Lubellion, because it just gets you more advantage that way. So great card here, 2 copies. If I was playing more than 50, I'd probably bump it up to the point where I'd have 3 copies in the main deck of Shrouded Dragon. I am, of course, playing 3 copies of the Aluber, the Jester of Despia. This card is insane. It is your best normal summon in the deck. Yes, I think it is better than Quem because it gets you access to not just Branded Fusion, but Branded Loss as well, or Branded Opening, or even Branded in Red, which are all amazing cards. It does have a second effect where you can summon itself back to the field and negate a card on the field, but it doesn't come up very often. I am playing 2 copies of Guiding Quem. This is our other main normal summon in the deck. Now, before I talk about Quem, I'm going to explain if you cannot afford 2 Quems, if you can only afford 1 Quem, or you only have 1 Quem, play Ad Libitum instead of the second Quem. That's just a very good alternative. You want to play Ad Libitum instead because it can do a lot of the same things in terms of recycling resources, which is really nice, and it's also easily able to be put into the graveyard through the effects of like Foolish Burial, or through the effects of Granganol, for example. There's a lot of different ways to get into the graveyard. Even Branded Fusion gets you there, or even something like the Despian Tragedy adding into your hand gets you there too. Either way, really solid option. Quem, if you can't play any of them, you don't have a single Quem, it gets really, really hard to play this deck optimally. But if you have none of them, play the copy of the Ad Libitum, but also instead of playing 1 copy of Cartesia, play 2. And the reason why is because Cartesia is one of the best cards in the deck to get you fusion summons on your opponent's turn, which is great, but also is an extra body on the field as well, and it recycles itself to the hand in the end phase if a fusion was sent there to the graveyard this turn. So really good. But if you have it at 2 copies in this specific variant, you're basically playing 4 copies of it, which means you're basically playing 7 copies of it because you have your Branded Openings at 3, you have your Quems at 2, that's 5, and you have your 2 copies of Cartesia. 7 copies is a bit too much, so I want to keep it at 6 to keep it a little bit more consistent for me, because opening 2 Cartesia is never fun. Either way, that's going to be our main Despian cards, but we have an extra one here in the Despian Tragedy. This is a bit of a side card here. It doesn't come up too often, but it is nice to have as a way to search for the Quem or for the Aluber. Or what I like even more is to use this effect to banish it from the graveyard, target a Branded Spell or Trap, and set it to my side of the field, which is really good. The problem is you can't activate both the effects to search and to set in the same turn, which does hurt quite a bit. Either way, great card to have access to, definitely a 1-up in the strategy. I am playing, of course, the 1 copy of Tri-Brigade Mercourier. Fantastic card. Negation, gets you additional +1s. It's a really good hand trap to stop other hand traps, assuming you have a Branded Fusion, or Branded Fusion monster, I should say, on the field. Really solid option. We are playing the 1 copy of Saronir, a great card, obviously really good at getting you cards in the graveyard, and of course the 1 copy of the Bestial Lubellion. This is the other kind of expensive card in the list. I don't think the deck works without Lubellion, because you want to get access to Branded Lost, and this is the way to do that. So Bestial Lubellion is great, and then the Saronir is good because it can be used to search out by the Lubellion to get into the graveyard, but it's also good for random interruptions on something like Diabellstar if you hard draw it. But it's even better because it gets you the cards in the graveyard that you want, because essentially Bestial Saronir plus Quem or plus Albion, 2 of those 3 cards gets you access to Branded Fusion from the deck without playing into Droll and Lockbird. Really, really nice there. Anyways, that's it for our main monsters as part of our engine. We do have a few other monsters, but they're not necessarily part of our engine itself. Starting off, of course, with the 2 copies of Edgem Chain, the 2 copies of Fright for Patchwork, and the 2 copies of Polymerization. I'm playing a small Edgem package, but I am playing it only with 2 of each card. A lot of the time in the past, people were playing either 3 Chain or 3 Patchwork. I think that's a mistake right now, because you don't want to play into Droll and Lockbird more than you're already going to. Having Patchwork in your hand, you want to start off with other things, because if you go Patchwork to add the Chain and the Polymerization, assuming you don't have access to Branded Fusion already, is a mistake. The reason why it's even better, and the reason why it's played more importantly, is because it gets you card advantage. So having this to just keep your hand fresh and full is really, really important. Moving on though to our spells and traps, our branded spells and traps, and the cards adjacent to that. We have, of course, the 1 copy of Foolish Burial. That's not where you're expecting me to go. Yeah, look, Foolish Burial is great. Essentially, this acts as another form of Quem. Really, really nice there to get cards in the graveyard. Foolish Burial helps facilitate the game plan of playing around Droll and Lockbird, which this format is going to be full of. Moving on though, we then have 3 copies of Branded Fusion. Yes, the best card in the deck. You want to see it all the time. If you open it, that is amazing. Ideally, you do open it, because if you open it with Aluber and they don't imperm the Aluber, you go and add Branded Lost, and sure, they might have Ash to play around the Branded Lost, but if they don't, then you're basically winning the game from there because you have access to Lost already on the field. Moving on though, we have 3 copies of the Branded Opening. This, in my opinion, is the second best card in the deck. I think it is better than Quem is right now. And the reason why is because this card has 2 effects that are fantastic. The first one is it can add essentially Branded Fusion from deck to hand through the effect of summoning out the Aluber in the draw phase to add it to hand so you play around Droll and Lockbird. But more importantly, this card has protection from destruction for your fusion monsters. There's so much destruction happening in the fire format right now. There's Promethean Princess, there's Ambler Whale, there's going to be Kieran. There's so much that does destroying. So you want to have Branded Opening as a way to kind of play around that. And it does a really good job of it because you can banish it. It doesn't activate, it just is a replacement effect, and that's really, really nice. I am also, of course, playing 3 copies of Fusion Deployment. This is the way you get access to Cartesia in the deck. So again, if you don't have Quem, then you want to play another Cartesia, so you have essentially 5 copies of it. But if you have 1 Quem, 1 Cartesia in the deck rather, you have 4 copies all the time, which is still really, really solid. And you have, of course, the ways to get access to it through your Branded Opening and your Quem itself. Really strong card here, does lock you into fusions, but what I like even more about it is if you reveal a Albaz fusion monster, you summon out Albaz and then you can infuse with your opponent's board, which can be really, really good. I am also playing 2 copies of Branded in Red. This is not standard. I think Branded in Red at 2 copies is amazing. I love it at 2 copies because it gets me access to pretty much anything I want in my graveyard. It lets me recycle resources, and it's great to have in the grind game especially, and there's so much grinding happening right now, and I find, because even if you manage to break a Snake Eye player's board, which can be done very easily, they're not losing, okay? The game isn't over just yet. They manage to get a search with the Ash or the Poplar, or summon back with Oak, or get another Ponic search, and they still have Island and whatnot. So having a second Branded in Red is great because you're not going to die on the fallback either. So having that second Branded in Red is just, it comes up all the time. It comes up all the time. And if it doesn't, if you don't like it, that's fine. Cut it to 1. I think it's fine at 1. I personally like it at 2 copies, so for that reason, I'm playing it at 2 copies. I also have the 1 copy of Branded Lost. Self-explanatory, amazing card, lets you kind of play around everything. You have to play Branded Lost in the strategy. It is just that good of a card. And of course, the 1 copy of Branded Retribution, as the end of our branded spells and traps. This gets you access to any of your branded spells and traps that's in the graveyard, except, well, so all these cards here except for the Foolish Burial. But either way, great option here. You want to send it there. It does have a second effect. It doesn't come up too often though, but it can essentially recycle materials, which can be nice. Moving on though to our non-engine, we have starting off with 3 copies of Super Polymerization. This card here is insane. I think it is mandatory to play in the main deck in Branded because it is just an amazing card in the format today in so many different decks. So having access to it is obviously number one, fantastic. But on top of that, allowing it to be a way to dodge infinite impermanence is really nice, because if you normal summon a Luber and your opponent has a board of monsters, let's say they have a light or a dark monster, normal Luber, activate effect, chain imperm, chain super poly, discard a card, fusion summon with the Luber and that light or dark monster, go into Queritus, and then at that point, your opponent can't really respond to it, and you're also in a situation where you can get your Branded Fusion back to hand, which is obviously really, really nice. I am playing, of course, 3 copies of Droll and Lockbird. I think this is the best hand trap in the format today. Yes, it is not a perfect hand trap, and Snake Eye does have lines that can play around it, but not all of them do. If they start with Bonfire, or they start with Ponix to normal summon and search, who cares? You droll them, their turn kind of ends, which is really, really nice. I am playing 3 copies of Ash Blossom. I was debating this one here, either playing 3 Imperm or playing 3 Nibiru in the main. I feel like the reason why Ash Blossom in this specific build makes more sense is because I'm playing the Droll and Lockbird, and this is my only other hand trap in the list. And the reason why is because Labyrinth is still going to be a good deck. So having Ash Blossom to stop the welcome, the big welcome, is really important, and the reason why is because Droll doesn't actually do anything against that strategy unless they open up a really poor hand. So it just didn't feel necessary, and for that reason, I want to stick with the Ash Blossoms here, but again, it was a debate if I wanted to play it in the main deck. I am playing the one called by the Grave, of course. This is our way to stop Ash Blossom, and I am playing the 3 copies of Triple Tactics Thrust. Thrust is a really, really good card in this deck for a few reasons. The first is because it gets you access to Fusion Duplication. If you get ashed, you activate Thrust, you set Duplication, and then you can do it on your opponent's draw phase, on their standby phase, whenever you want. Really good. It also gets you access to Triple Tactics Talents, which is an insane card against the Fire King matchup, because if they manage to turn on your talents, then you have a way to just kind of shut down one of their interruptions, which is really, really nice. Anyways, Thrust is a great card, but I understand it is quite expensive, so there are alternatives. The first is going to be you can play Nadir Servant. That is a great card, but I feel like you have to actually incorporate Despia and Lulu Lilith into the extra deck, which not everyone wants to do. And the second option is going to be Crossout Designator. I personally prefer that one there, but if you're going to play Crossout, you're going to take out the 3 Thrust, you're going to take out the Fusion Duplication, you're probably going to take out the extra copy of Branded in red, and you're going to add in 2 Nibiru and 2 copies of the Infinite Impermanence as a way to play around both of those cards as well. So just keep in mind, that's what you can do. Is it mandatory? No, but I think that Thrust does the best job while also taking up the least amount of space, which is really, really important. That's going to be it for our main deck. 50 cards in the main deck. Let's go ahead and jump into our extra deck, starting off, of course, with the main piece in the extra deck. The 2 copies of Mirror Jade, the Ice Blade Dragon. Really good against pretty much every single deck in the format. We also have the 2 Albion as a way to get to it and get us access to our branded spells and traps, and the 1 copy of Lubellion to recycle resources, and as part of our main combo, that gets us access to Lost and the Mirror Jade on the field. Great card here. Again, this line is so good, and you have to play this at this ratio. I don't think that you need to play the 2nd copy of Lubellion. I would like to, but you don't need to. I am also playing the 1 copy of Titaniclad, which I think is mandatory, the 1 copy of Rinbrum, which is also, in my opinion, mandatory, the 1 copy of Ranganol, again, mandatory, and then 2 other cards, I should say actually 3 other cards, that I think are also mandatory, but if you don't want to play them, there are alternatives. The first is going to be Guardian Chimera, the 2nd, Peritus, the 3rd, Dragostapelia. Now, Dragostapelia is great because it gets you access to negates. It can also be really good to shuffle back in your copy of the Mirror Jade, because you can shuffle back in your Mirror Jade with the Lubellion and something like a random dark monster in your graveyard, and then you can get access to a Dragostapelia for a negate. And the deck doesn't really have many negates. Queritus is great to attack reduce, but it's also even better because it has the effect where if it's destroyed by a card effect, you can actually summon out from your deck a copy of Fallen of Albaz or a Despian monster. Guardian Chimera is obviously elite, especially when paired with Polymerization in your deck and Branded in red. Rinbrum is great as a way to revive back an Albaz and act as an interruption, and then Titaniclad summons an Albaz or a Dogmatica monster from your deck in the end phase, which is again really, really nice. Now, the last 4 cards in the extra deck are not mandatory, but they are dependent on what you're playing. If you are playing Super Polymerization, you are playing a Mud Dragon, and you are also playing a copy of Garura. You have to play these 2 cards here. Okay, they're that good. You want to play them. Obviously, if you're not playing Super Poly, you don't have to, but it's nice to have. I also think that Albion is getting close to mandatory in almost every single list. And the reason why is because this card here kind of beats an entire Fire King board's Disruption. Having access to this means you can't be targeted, which is great. It also revives cards from the graveyard during your opponent's turn, so that you can get back cards like an Ash or a Poplar they would try and target, or you can get back a Flamberge Dragon that stops them from being able to extend with Promethean Princess, for example. But because this card can't be targeted, everything in the Fire King deck targets except for like Kieran and then something like the Anvil Whale. But Kieran destroys, Anvil Whale destroys. You have access to Branded Opening in your graveyard to protect it. So having Albion is huge, huge for this deck. So I would recommend it, but it is something that is not mandatory, but it is getting close to there in my mind. And my last card is going to be Sprint the Iron Dash Dragon. This card is the one cuttable card in the extra deck, in my opinion. It is a really good card. It does a lot of good things for you because it turns Albaz into a fusion summon pretty much all the time because your opponent's always going to be special summoning in their turn. So you activate it, special summon Albaz, and then you're off to the races because you can get rid of a nice interruption. Is it cuttable though? Yes, there are other options that you can use. So just keep that in mind. If you want to play another card in there, you definitely can, but I like Sprint more than others right now. That's going to be our extra deck. Moving on to our side deck, we are of course going to be playing with 3 copies of Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion. I think this is a fantastic card in the side deck right now. Helps out a lot with Labyrinth. If I ever find that Droll and Lockbird is not performing in a matchup, Bell and Ash will likely cover my bases, so I want to have that. I also am playing 3 copies of the Nibiru, the Primal Being, another great card. I feel like it's just good to have access to, especially in this format. And if I find that Ash is not performing well, or if I want to take out some engine for 2 more hand traps, then Nibiru would be a great option here as well. I am playing 3 copies of Kashtir Fenrir. I think this is a card that comes in so often. Pretty much every single matchup that you could possibly have, you can side in Fenrir. It's just dependent on, is Nibiru better? Is Bell better? Is something else better? So Fenrir is great because it replaces itself, it's good in every matchup, and it gets you an extra body, which is nice. We are also playing 2 copies of Cosmic Cyclone. Fantastic card. Really good. Lets me get rid of Fire King Island, gets rid of the Masquerade Knight in the spell and trap zone, I should say, and of course lets me get a way to respond to the spells and the trap activations rather of the Labyrinth players while they have Lady on the field, so it stops them from getting access to a set from the deck. I am playing the 1 Harpy's Feather Duster, fantastic option here, really good, searchable off the thrust, as well as the 1 copy of Lightning Storm and the 1 copy of Evenly Matched. Lightning Storm is not acting as a monster destruction, it's acting as another copy of Harpy's Feather Duster. It can be a monster destruction if I need to, but most of the time it won't. And then Evenly Matched is, well, Evenly Matched, it's searchable off the thrust, so I'm only playing it at 1 copy. If you don't have the thrusts, play it at more than 1. And then of course, the last card, Masquerade the Blazing Dragon. Really good. I should side it in every game 3. I had a box tournament, I should say, yesterday, and I did not side it in game 3. I tied because of that reason, and for that reason I ended up finishing 2nd place, which was obviously not ideal. I wanted to get that box, but I didn't get there, and the reason why is because I did not take my own advice and side Masquerade in going into game 3, even though we had like 20 plus minutes on the clock going into game 3. But definitely sided in there. Either way, that's going to be it. That's going to be our deck, our 50 card main deck, our 15 card extra, and our 15 card side deck. I feel really good about the list itself. I think the list has a lot going for it. I think in general there is just pretty much, it can play through everything. So with that being said, let me know what you think about the list down in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, then leave a like, and if you guys want to see combos, then you have to join the Discord server. I'm not posting combo videos to YouTube for this specific list here because it's branded. You guys know how to play branded. It's been around forever. There's so many different combo guides out there. It would just be a bit redundant on my part. But if you guys want combos, then join the Discord server. Link is in the description. Check me out on Twitter as well, and subscribe to the channel as well. We are so close at the time of recording to 7,000 subscribers, which is amazing, and our goal is 7,500 right now, so we're getting super close to that goal. And of course, leave a like on the video, because if we hit 250 likes on the video, then I will bring you some live duels with this deck against Fire King and show you why this deck is the ultimate counter to Fire King. But with that being said, let me know what you thought about the deck profile down in the comments below. Leave a like on the video for the actual duels that you want to see. Join the Discord server and subscribe to the channel for more amazing competitive Yu-Gi-Oh videos. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next time.